Diet, something that's been really popular, especially the last few years. But obviously, I think looking back on my life, I remember really hitting the scene, maybe 20 years or so ago when the Atkins diet got popular. So this isn't anything really that's new, but it's kind of been in vogue, like I said, the last couple of years. And let's get one thing out of the way before I say the rest of what I'm going to say is that I was one of the keto zealots there for at least a couple of years or so. I was a keto guy, believed in it. I had some good weight loss success with it. I think at one point my weight got a little out of control, and I lost about 40 pounds on keto, close to 40 pounds anyway. So I do have experience with it. It can work, though it does have its drawbacks. It's got some flaws to it. And ultimately, like a lot of things, it's just not necessarily the right fit for everybody. So let's talk a little bit about keto and what it's good for and what it's not. So just in case you didn't know, just to get some basic info out of the way, keto, the ketogenic diet was originally developed, I think back in the 1930s by doctors to help treat people with epilepsy. For whatever reason, it works profoundly well with limiting the number of seizures that epileptic people get. So that's really where it started. So it'd been around for a good while, and then I want to say it was in the 70s, maybe even in the 60s. Dr. Atkins kind of started using it in his practice as a cardiologist, dealing with people with heart problems. And for one, he needed to get weight off these people because they had heart problems and their weight was out of control, but also he needed to get their inflammation markers down to be able to prepare them for surgery. And then, he wrote a couple of books, and, frankly, people laughed at that guy for a long time. And, there was a lot of follow-up research that came out that proved that, a lot of what he said was correct. It, on its face, you look at keto and, people are eating steak and bacon and cheese and this, that, whatever, and it sounds like, there's no way you can lose weight eating that, and it's got to be terrible for your cholesterol and so on and so forth. And, done properly, those things aren't detrimental, but there's still good and bad ways to do keto, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. So one big thing to mention when you talk about keto is, yes, sure, it can work, but it is by no means whatsoever the magic bullet for fat loss. And that's kind of what it's been hailed as by a lot of people, for the past few years. Of course, I think the pendulum's starting to swing back on it a little bit. But you get a lot of people that just have it stuck in their head that if you want to lose weight, you got to do keto because it's just the best way to do it. It's really not. There's a good bit of research that's showing, that calorie for calorie, ketogenic diets are not any more effective for losing weight than just good old-fashioned, caloric restriction with, a balanced diet. So if your reason for wanting to do keto is because you think it's the best way to lose weight, you can forget that, because it's just not. There is one main kind of benefit of keto, and it's a reason that a lot of people tend to like it, is when you get into ketosis, that tends to suppress appetite. So, of course, if you've done any reading on keto at all or talked to people, they'll tell you the first week or two is pretty rough, because your body's going through that adjustment phase of where it's no longer carbohydrate dependent anymore. It's switching over to using fat as fuel, and while it's doing that, it doesn't really know what's going on. It's kind of stuck in between. But once you get past that, your body makes a switch and you're generally not even hungry a lot of the times. And that was, one thing for me that was kind of nice, especially, being a chef working in professional kitchens. There's food in front of me all the time, and it was helpful for me, when I was in ketosis, that you could put a plate of food right in front of me of stuff that I knew I didn't need to be eating, and I really had very little desire to eat it, and it was easy to turn that food away because I didn't have much of an appetite, which, like I said, for a lot of people that's a good selling point on keto. It's nothing out there is really all bad for the most part. There's always pros and cons to anything, and really I think when you get into a lot of the cons with keto, a lot of it is, it's not necessarily inherent in the ketogenic diet itself, but I think the way it's been kind of bastardized by a lot of people, and people still have the wrong idea about Dr. Atkins, because again, they associate keto with being able to eat eggs and bacon and this and that, and there's things about those foods that aren't necessarily ideal all the time. When if you actually read any of Dr. Atkins' work, he was adamant about not eating bacon because he was insistent that nitrates are terrible for you, and so on and so forth. Even getting into some of the nuts that he would recommend just based on which types of fats those specific nuts had, because again, you talk to a lot of people that do keto, and they eat handfuls of nuts, and they eat bacon all the time, and this, that, whatever. Well, that's not really a smart way of doing keto. There's another kind of version of keto out there that's I don't want to say that it's new, but it's kind of at least relatively new on social media from the past few years with some guys out there that are pushing it. I know Danny Vega was kind of big on it for a while. I don't know if he still does it, but there's a lot of people in the keto community that do what they refer to as carnivore keto, and basically they only eat meat, which I think that's kind of silly. I don't really understand the reasonings for it. From what I can recall, they tend to believe that everything that their body needs is in meat. There's fat soluble vitamins. Obviously, I'll sit here and talk about how nutritionally dense beef and fish and things like that are all day long, but to say that you shouldn't eat vegetables, I think is just outright stupid. And you get into this, it kind of gets into a larger kind of issue that I have just with the whole idea behind keto. Is people talk about with the carnivore keto, they say we can survive on eating nothing but meat. And it's like, okay, I'm willing to believe you can survive that way. You're not going to die. But I mean, is that all you're trying to do? Is just not die? That's a pretty low standard to shoot for, and considering it's 2020, the age of modern medicine, and we put people on the moon and this, that, whatever, to make mere survival your selling point, to me that's just not a very good argument on this at all. And that kind of gets into the larger issue of the ketogenic diet in general. They talk about your body doesn't technically need to have carbs, and you can survive without them, and it's like, yeah, I mean, okay, sure, like that's true, but if you're somebody that lifts weights or does this or does that or whatever, maybe you play in rec league basketball, or maybe you like to go run or this, that, whatever, yeah, sure, you can you can do all these things okay, without any carbohydrates, but this isn't necessarily a discussion of, the viability of it from a mere survival standpoint. This is about looking for optimal performance. Whether you consider yourself an athlete or you lift weights to stay in shape. To say that you don't need this just to survive, again, that's a pretty poor argument, when I think most of us are shooting for more than just not dying because of our diet. So that's a big point that I would make. But again, especially with carnivore keto, but even with keto in general, you have to be very careful with, obviously carbohydrate intake predicates the whole thing. But doing keto smart, you want to eat as many vegetables as you can, especially leafy greens, your non-starchy stuff. But there's things like tomatoes and carrots and this and that, whatever. Things that we know for a fact are highly nutritious, and on this diet, basically you can't eat it. You really can't eat fruit on the ketogenic diet, and I don't care if it's your preference to eat a whole lot of fruit or not. It goes back to, we know that fruits are some of the most nutritionally dense things that you can eat, and you have this diet that says you can't eat any of it. I mean, you have to give me a really good reason for why that makes sense, and I don't buy it. So this is all just kind of a getting around to saying that, if you're doing this for basic health and fitness reasons and wanting to lose weight, I think keto is a very backwards way to get there. Just besides the fact that, for most people, say you're trying to lose 30 pounds, it's pretty easy to commit to a diet like that, just to get those 30 pounds off. But after that, you're not going to want anything to do with it anymore, because it's been 3 months since you've had a piece of bread or this, that, whatever, and you can have toast with your eggs in the morning and still lose weight. You can't have toast with your eggs every morning and still be in ketosis. But at the end of the day, ketosis isn't the goal. It's a tool to help get there. And so, like I said, if you're just trying to lose weight and be healthy, you don't need keto to be able to do it. That said, I do think keto has its place for some people. Obviously it was developed for epileptics, but it does have some benefits for suppressing inflammation markers. So if you suffer from inflammatory diseases, it might be an avenue that could help. Obviously, you need to talk to your doctor about that. I'm not a doctor, so I can't make that recommendation for you. But like I said, Dr. Atkins used it extensively with people with cardiovascular disease. It could help in that arena. I watched a TED Talk a few years ago. A doctor running a weight loss clinic. I think she was in Houston, and she was able to have people lose. Mostly, she catered to the diabetic community, but she could get people off of diabetes medication and lose a lot of weight just by getting them on a ketogenic diet. And it kind of goes into some of the madness with the medical community and how they typically treat diabetics, telling them to still eat carbs when it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So if you're diabetic, keto could make a lot of sense for you. Again, talk to your doctor. But long story short, if you just want to lose some weight and be healthy, unless you really want to do keto because that way of eating appeals to you, and if it does, that's great. But don't do keto just because you feel like that's what you have to do to be able to lose weight.